The first time I saw her, I felt a cold warning inside me. It was not a special sight, just a deep feeling that trouble was coming. It began on a bright, sunny day, a day that felt like a gift. The sun was warm like a blanket, and the air was filled with happy bird songs. It was a perfect day for playing outside, a perfect day in a life I had made as perfect as possible. My dog Buddy, a golden retriever with fur like sunshine and a big heart, was enjoying the day on our neat lawn. He was moving in happy, clumsy ways, jumping to catch a butterfly that was just out of his reach. He was not barking or digging holes. He was a picture of pure happiness, a good boy. He was the living sign of the peace I had wanted for so long. Then, the quiet afternoon was broken by a quiet, strange presence. A silver car, sleek and like a shark, stopped at the curb near my house. It did not fit. Its lines were too sharp, its silence too scary for our soft neighborhood. The driver's door opened, and a woman came out. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, so stiff it seemed to float and ignore the wind. Her face, however, showed strong disapproval, her lips a thin, hard line. She walked onto my lawn as if she owned it, her sharp heels poking holes in the green grass. Each step was an aggressive act, a small attack. Oh no, this was not a friendly visit. She stopped right in front of me, her shadow falling over me like a sudden cloud. She pointed a long, thin finger at Buddy, who had stopped chasing the butterfly and was now sitting politely, his head tilted with innocent wonder. Her nail was painted a bright, blood red, perfect and sharp like glass. "You need to control your animal," she said, not asking. Her voice was cold and clear like a doctor's tool, without any warmth. It cut through the warm air, leaving a chill. I could only stare, my mouth open in disbelief at her boldness. The words hung between us, a stark contrast to the perfect scene. Buddy, feeling my tension, gave a soft whine and nudged his head against my leg, looking up at me with his trusting brown eyes, as if to ask what was wrong. That was my first meeting with Carol. She was the woman who would try to break apart my life, all because of my dog. That was the day a quiet war began in my neighborhood, a place, oddly, named Pleasant Meadows. Our neighborhood is named Pleasant Meadows. It's a very nice, gated community, a safe place from the busy, sharp parts of the outside world. When I first bought my house, the builder's shiny book had pictures of happy families, kids laughing on perfect playgrounds, and couples walking by calm, man-made ponds. It promised a life of peace and order, a carefully planned existence. The name itself was a promise of peace, a good place to get away from the noise of the city I had needed to escape. I moved here 2 years ago, and for a long time, it felt like I'd found my own piece of heaven. I had run from a city life that had fallen apart for me. A failed business, a relationship that ended quietly, and the deep loneliness of a big city had left me lost. Pleasant Meadows, with its quiet streets and regular pace, was my rescue boat. The houses are all pretty, different versions of suburban comfort, each with its own neat garden and a charming white fence. The streets are wide and clean, shaded by old oak trees, and so safe that the neighborhood kids can ride their bikes until the soft orange glow of the streetlights comes on at night. I came here after that sad and hard time in my life, and the deep quiet of Pleasant Meadows felt like a warm hug for my hurt feelings. It was just what I needed. I had a small, easy-to-care-for house, a little garden in the back where I grew red tomatoes and green basil, and of course, my best friend, Buddy. Buddy was more than just a dog to me. He was my constant friend, my furry family, the steady heart of my quiet life. I found him, or maybe we found each other, at a city animal shelter, a place of barking and quiet sadness. I had gone there on a whim, feeling a sharp pain of loneliness. In a cage in the back, I saw him, a shaking bundle of bones and fear, a puppy left alone in a box by the side of a highway. He was very thin and scared of his own shadow. When I knelt by his cage, he did not bark or wag his tail. He just moved to the far corner, shaking. I sat there for almost an hour, just talking to him in a soft, calm voice, until, finally, he crawled forward and licked my finger. I like to say I saved him, but really, he saved me. His big, strong, endless love helped my sad heart feel better. His happy, honest friendship helped me heal. He grew into a gentle giant whose tail is almost always wagging. His mood is as sunny as his yellow fur, and almost everyone who met him liked him right away. The neighborhood kids, especially a boy named Liam and a girl named Chloe, loved him. They lived down the street and would often come to my house and knock on the door, their small, hopeful faces looking through the screen. "Can Buddy come out to play?" they'd ask. He was like the friendly symbol for the whole street, a fluffy ball of fun that made everyone smile. For 2 happy years, life in Pleasant Meadows was perfect. It was everything I wanted and more. We had a homeowners association, the HOA, that made the rules, but they were mostly a gentle force in the background. They sent nice, polite letters 4 times a year with soft reminders to, "Please remember to keep your grass cut," or suggestions to, "Please put up nice holiday decorations." That was all. I paid my fees on time, I kept my house and yard clean, and I enjoyed my simple, happy life with Buddy. I did not know that this perfect life was about to be turned upside down by a new neighbor with a mean heart and a strong will. Carol and her husband, Robert, moved into the big 2-story house across the street from me. The moment their giant moving truck, a huge steel and noisy vehicle, rumbled down our quiet street, I felt the happy, peaceful feeling in our neighborhood start to change. To spoil like milk left out in the sun? The movers were strong, skilled men, but they looked very stressed. I watched from my window as Carol stood on her new lawn, her body stiff like a statue, telling them where to put every box and piece of furniture. She looked like a hungry bird watching a small worm, her eyes seeing everything. She was always yelling at them, her voice sharp and harsh, giving orders and complaints. I saw one of the movers almost drop a heavy vase, and the flood of angry words she unleashed on him made me physically flinch. Even with this upsetting start, I wanted to be a good neighbor. That is how we do things in Pleasant Meadows. So, I baked cookies. I baked my famous chocolate chip cookies, the ones with extra chocolate chips and a bit of sea salt, and they were still warm from the oven. I put them on a pretty plate, covered them with a clean towel, and walked across the street to say hello and welcome them. A man with a very tired face opened the door. His eyes, though weary, looked kind. He told me his name was Robert, and he was Carol's husband. He seemed like a nice man, but he was very quiet and looked almost sorry to be there, as if he did not want to be part of his own life. His shoulders were slumped, always looking defeated. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, offering the plate of cookies. A simple, friendly thing to do. "I'm Mark, from across the street." Robert managed a weak smile. "Robert, nice to meet you. That's very thoughtful." He reached for the plate, but then Carol appeared behind him, coming from the shadows of the hallway like a surprise ghost. She looked at my cookies, and a very unhappy look, a look of strong dislike, came on her face. She wrinkled her nose as if I had offered her trash. "We don't eat processed sugar," she said. Her voice made it sound like she was better than me, like my simple gift was an insult to her fine tastes. It made me feel a little strange and small. Then her eyes, which were gray like a cloudy sky, looked past me. She looked toward my house, and her eyes got very small. She saw Buddy. Buddy was just watching us from my living room window, his head tilted with curiosity, his tail giving a soft, hopeful thump 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 against the floor. "I trust your dog is not a nuisance," she said. It did not sound like a question. It sounded like a warning, a hidden threat. I was so surprised by her immediate coldness, but I was determined to be nice. I wanted us to be friends, or at least polite, so I made myself smile. "Not at all," I said in a happy voice. "He's a very good boy. The kids on the block absolutely love him." Carol just made a little sound, a rude, dismissive sound, like, Then she turned her back on me. She just walked away, going back into the shadows. The conversation was over. Robert, her husband, gave me a little shrug. His shoulders went up and down, and his eyes looked helpless, like he was saying sorry without words. Then, the heavy wooden door closed right in my face. That was the second time I met her. It left a sour, yucky feeling in my mouth. My sweet cookies could not make that bad feeling go away. I walked back to my house feeling unsettled, the plate of rejected cookies feeling heavy in my hand. The problem started in a small way. They were like the little shakes you feel before a big earthquake, small signs of the destruction to come. A few days after Carol and Robert moved in, I was walking Buddy. He was on his leash. We were walking on the sidewalk. It was the same sidewalk we walked on every day, hundreds of times. We were coming home from our morning walk in the park. Carol came out of her house dressed in clean sports clothes to get her newspaper. She saw us. Her face immediately frowned. "Your dog's leash is far too long," she called out to me. She was standing in her own driveway, far away, her hands on her hips. I looked down at the leash in my hand. It was a normal leash. It was 6 feet long. It was the kind you can buy in any pet store. It was not one of the super long pull-out ones. "It's just a standard leash," I said back to her. I tried very hard to make my voice sound friendly and calm, to not make things worse. "The community rules, Section 4, Paragraph B, state that all pets must be under direct physical control at all times," she said. It sounded like she had read the whole HOA rulebook and remembered it. "A leash of that length is a loophole. It's dangerous." I was so shocked. Buddy was walking right next to me, his tail wagging, very soft and gentle. He was not pulling. He was not jumping. He was just walking very calmly, sometimes sniffing an interesting patch of grass. "He's perfectly under my control, Carol," I said. This time my voice was a little stronger. My patience was starting to wear thin. She gave me a mean look, a look that said she knew better. Then she turned around and walked back into her house. I heard her mumble something. It sounded like irresponsible pet owners. I tried to let it go. I told myself, maybe she is just new here. Maybe she is stressed from moving. Maybe she is just a little tense. I told myself to give her time. Maybe she will be nicer later. I was still hoping that my peaceful life was not truly in danger. But it was not just for a little while. It was the first shot in her war. It was not long before Carol found another thing to complain about. I was playing fetch with Buddy. We were in my own backyard. My backyard has a tall wooden fence all around it. It is my private space. Buddy was having so much fun. He was jumping high in the air. He was trying to catch his favorite toy. It was a tennis ball that made a squeaky sound. Squeak! Squeak! Suddenly, I heard a sharp sound from her house. Ahem. I turned around. I saw Carol. She was standing on her balcony. Her balcony is on the second floor of her house, giving her a perfect view into my yard. She was holding her phone. She was recording a video of us. "This is supposed to be a peaceful community," she shouted down to me. "That constant squeaking is incredibly noisy." I just stared at her. I could not believe it. The little squeak of a dog toy, was that really a problem? It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. "He's just playing, Carol," I called back up to her, feeling a rush of anger inside me. My privacy felt invaded. "In my own yard." "It's noise pollution," she said loudly. "I'm trying to meditate." The whole thing was so crazy. It was amazing how silly it was, yet her strong feelings made it seem evil. From that day on, her complaints got worse and worse, more often and more strange. She complained that Buddy's water bowl on my front porch was an unauthorized structure and could grow mosquitoes. She complained that he stared at her house with menacing intent. "How can a dog look threatening when he is just looking?" She even filed a formal complaint with the HOA that just having Buddy live next door was a psychological burden and was making her house worth less. Then, the first official letter came. It was a letter from the HOA, printed on thick, cream-colored paper. Someone had slipped it quietly under my door. The letter said that a formal complaint had been filed against me. It said I was failing to control my pet. It said I was causing a noise disturbance. The letter even said there was excessive barking and displays of aggressive behavior. I was completely shocked. My blood ran cold. Buddy almost never barked. If he did bark, it was just one happy woof to say hello to the mailman, who always had a treat for him. Or maybe he would bark at a very interesting squirrel. And aggressive? Buddy was so gentle. He was afraid of a strong wind. He was the least aggressive animal I had ever known. I knew who was behind the letter. I knew it with a feeling like a cold stone in my tummy. It was Carol. She was turning her small annoyances into official weapons. I decided I had to try to talk to her again. I had to try to make her understand. I hoped she had some reason, some kindness deep inside her. I walked over to her house that evening. My heart was beating very fast. I was scared, but I was also angry. Robert answered the door again. He looked even more tired than before. He looked thinner, and the kindness in his eyes was covered by a deep worry. "Is Carol here?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice steady and calm. He nodded his head slowly. He did not look at me. His eyes looked at the floor. "She's busy right now," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But then I heard her voice, It was a loud, high voice coming from inside the house. "Is that him? Tell him to get that filthy animal off our street before I call the police!" she yelled. Robert winced. It looked like her words physically hurt him. A small spasm of pain crossed his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to me. I could barely hear him. She's had some bad experiences with dogs in the past." It was a weak excuse, but I took it, trying to find some common ground. I tried to understand. I tried to feel a little sympathy. "I'm happy to talk to her about it," I offered. "Buddy is really gentle. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Maybe if she just got to know him." Robert just shook his head, a look of total hopelessness on his face. "It's not that simple," he said, and then he gently closed the door. I walked back to my house. I felt completely defeated. I felt annoyed, and I felt very, very angry. It was so clear. Talking to Carol was not going to work. She did not want to solve the problem. She wanted to create one. She wanted to win. The letters from the HOA became a normal, scary part of my life. A new one would show up every 2 weeks. It was like clockwork. A cream-colored envelope would be at my door, a sign of more stress. Carol was building a case against Buddy. It was a very careful, well-documented case. But it was a case built on lies and exaggerations. She was recording every little thing he did. If he barked one time when the mailman came, she would write a report. She would say he barked for hours on end without stopping. If he playfully rolled in the grass in my own backyard, she would describe it as wild, threatening behavior, showing an unstable animal. She started watching the edge of her yard, her phone always in her hand, ready to get more evidence. Her blonde head would pop up over the fence between our yards at random times. It made me feel like I was always being watched, a prisoner in my own home. It was deeply, very upsetting. The happy feeling I used to have in my home was slowly fading. It was being replaced by a constant fear and worry. I always had a small knot of anxiety in my stomach. It never went away. I started to take Buddy for walks very early in the morning, when the sky was still gray, or late at night in the dark. I just wanted to avoid seeing her. I found myself hushing Buddy if he gave a happy bark. That made me feel bad. It made me hate myself. He would look up at me with his big brown eyes. They looked confused and sad. The happy light in his eyes started to dim. That broke my heart more than any letter from the HOA ever could. He was a retriever. Retrievers are born to be outside, to chase balls, to greet the world with a wagging tail. Now, he spent most of his day just lying sadly by the door, waiting for an adventure I was too worried to take him on. I knew I could not do this by myself, so I started to talk to my other neighbors. I felt so much better after I talked to them. They were all on my side. They were all very supportive. Mrs. Gable lives next door. She's a sweet, smart woman in her 70s. Her grandchildren loved to play with Buddy. She said Carol was just a sour woman with too much time and not enough joy on her hands. The Millers are a young couple. They have 2 small children, Chloe and Liam. They told me not to worry. "We all know Buddy is a sweetheart, Mark," Mr. Miller said, bouncing his baby on his hip. "That woman is just looking for trouble. Don't let her get to you." Liam, their little boy, even drew a picture for me. It was a crayon drawing of Buddy wearing a superhero cape, with the words, "Buddy is a good boy," written in shaky letters. Liam gave it to me with a serious face. I kept that little piece of paper. I taped it to my fridge, and it felt as special as a winning lottery ticket. Their support was like a rescue rope for my tired feelings. It was a comfort, but it could not stop the letters from the HOA. The letters were official, and they were threatening. The rules, no matter how they were being twisted, seemed to be on Carol's side. The whole problem came to a big, terrible point. It happened at the next HOA meeting. The HOA had a meeting every month. The letter I got this time was different from the others. It was printed on thicker paper. It used stronger, scarier words. It was a final warning and an official summons. The letter said I had to appear at the next meeting to address the ongoing nuisance of your pet, and it said the board would render a final resolution. A cold feeling of dread washed all over me. I knew what this was. This was Carol's endgame. The meeting was in the community clubhouse. The clubhouse was a plain room with beige walls and flickering lights. There were rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs. The room smelled of old coffee and rules. I walked in holding a thick binder. The binder was my weapon, full of my proof. I had shiny photos of Buddy playing gently with the neighborhood kids. I had signed and dated letters from a dozen of my neighbors, all saying Buddy was sweet. I even had a certificate from when Buddy went to puppy obedience school years ago. It said he was a model canine citizen. Carol was already there, of course. She was sitting in the front row, looking like a queen. She was wearing an all-white suit that made her look even more severe and cold. Her blonde hair was perfect. It did not move at all. She looked at me and gave me a smug, winning smile. It was a smile that said, "I am going to win." I felt a surge of anger and went to the very back of the room to sit down. The HOA board had 3 people. They were the people who made the decisions, and they looked very uninterested. There was Mr. Henderson, the president. He was a grumpy old man who seemed to always frown. He seemed to hate everyone and everything. There was Mrs. Davis, the secretary. She was a shy, quiet woman who never said anything. She looked like she was afraid of her own shadow, always playing with her papers and refusing to look at anyone. And then there was Mr. Peterson, the treasurer. He seemed much more interested in the money books in front of him than the human problems in the room. He kept tapping his pen with an air of bored impatience. Carol presented her case against Buddy. She was very dramatic, like a lawyer on TV. She showed her phone pictures, which were blurry and out of context. A picture of Buddy yawning was shown as him baring his teeth. A video of him chasing a squirrel was edited to look like a frenzied attack. She spoke with a shaky, practiced voice, talking about her fear for her safety, her chronic stress, and the constant, unending noise that was destroying her peace of mind. She painted a picture of Buddy that was terrible and completely false. She made him sound like a monster, a 4-legged terror that was a danger to the quiet of Pleasant Meadows. Then, it was my turn to speak. My hands were shaking, but I took a deep breath. I did my best. I walked to the front and opened my binder of proof. I showed my pictures of Buddy being his normal, friendly, silly self. I read the wonderful, heartfelt letters from my neighbors out loud. I spoke from my heart. My voice was shaky with feeling as I talked about how much Buddy meant to me, how he had saved me from a dark place. I talked about how he was a loved and gentle member of our community. I thought, for a silly, simple moment, that truth and logic would win. But I was wrong. I did not understand the power of a determined bully, and I had greatly underestimated how little the board cared. Mr. Henderson looked at me over his reading glasses. His face did not change. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice a low, rough sound. "The rules are the rules. We have received many documented complaints over several months. The evidence is clear." I was too shocked to speak for a moment. "What evidence?" I finally managed to ask. "Her words against my words? Her blurry photos against the written, signed statements of half the neighborhood?" Mr. Henderson just shrugged his shoulders. It was a small, dismissive movement that said my efforts were useless. "The board has reached a decision," he announced, his voice flat and final. "Your dog is seen as a legal nuisance under the community rules. You have 2 options. You can either rehome the animal, or you will face a fine of $100 for every day the animal remains on the property. If you fail to comply within 30 days, the association will be forced to take legal action to have you and the animal removed from the community." The room became very quiet. I could hear the loud, buzzing sound of the lights above me. Get rid of Buddy? My Buddy? It was an idea I could not imagine. It was unthinkable. It was like they were asking me to cut off my own arm. It was like they were asking me to throw away a piece of my soul. I looked over at Carol. She was trying to hide a smile of pure victory behind her hand, but she was failing. I could see the cruel shine in her eyes. At that exact moment, something inside of me broke. The fear, the worry, the frustration. I had been holding it all inside for months, trying to be fair, trying to be the better person. But now, it all exploded. It turned into a big, hot burst of anger. It was a rightful anger. I stood up very fast, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My hands were closed into tight fists at my sides. "You can't do this," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I had. "This isn't fair. This isn't right. This isn't just—" Mr. Henderson just sighed. A long, tired sound. He sounded like a man who did not want to be bothered. "The decision is final, Mr. Johnson," he said. "The meeting is over." I walked out of that clubhouse in a daze. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I felt like my whole world had just fallen down around me. I went straight home. I hugged Buddy so tight, burying my face in his soft, sunny fur. He probably wondered what was wrong. But he just licked my face and his tail made a soft thumping sound on the floor, a comforting rhythm in the loud silence of my sadness. I sat there on my living room floor, Buddy's warm head resting in my lap, for what felt like hours. My eyes landed on the HOA rulebook. It was lying on my coffee table, the very paper that was causing me so much pain. I had been reading it for weeks, looking at every page, searching for a loophole, a forgotten rule, any tiny bit of hope. And then, my eyes caught a section I had not paid much attention to before. It was Section 7. It was titled, Election and Governance of the Board of Directors. The president, the secretary, and the treasurer, they were all elected by the homeowners, by the people who lived here, and the next election was in just 3 months. A wild, bold, crazy idea started to grow in my mind. It grew in the darkness of my sadness, a tiny spark in the stifling gloom. It was a long shot. It was a desperate, last chance. But it was the only chance I had left. If I couldn't get justice from the HOA, then I would become the HOA. The very next morning, my despair was gone. It had been changed overnight by my anger into a hard, sharp determination. I was ready to fight. I started my campaign. I knew I couldn't do this all by myself. My first stop was to go see my strongest supporter, Mrs. Gable. I found her in her garden, taking care of her beautiful roses. I told her my crazy plan. I expected her to tell me I was being silly, to be careful, but she did not. Her eyes, which were usually soft and kind, lit up. They sparkled with a fiery spirit. "It's about time someone stood up to that grumpy old Henderson," she said, cutting a dead rose from its bush with a satisfying crunch. "He's been running this place like his own little kingdom for years, and Peterson and Davis are his loyal helpers who just let him do whatever he wants." Then she told me about all the other people in the neighborhood who were not happy. She told me about families who got big fines because their children had left a tricycle on their own lawn overnight. She told me about Mr. Abernathy, a retired woodworker, who got a formal violation for putting up a handmade birdhouse that wasn't on the approved list of yard art. She told me about the gardeners who were frustrated by the very strict, unfair rules about what flowers they could plant. She told me about the young couples who were worried about rising fees, but the board never listened to their concerns. I suddenly realized something. My personal fight for my dog, Buddy, was a sign of a much bigger problem. The HOA was not helping our community. It was suffocating it. My fight for my dog had just become a fight for everyone in Pleasant Meadows. Mrs. Gable became my unofficial campaign manager. Together, we started to plan. We started to build our support. We came up with a simple, strong slogan: Pleasant Meadows for people, not for power. We designed simple but nice-looking flyers. They had a picture of a smiling Buddy on them, the superhero drawing from little Liam right beside it. We started to go door to door. At first, this was very scary for me. My first few tries were not very good. My voice was shaky. I stammered when I tried to explain why I was running. But then I knocked on the door of the Abernathys. After I told them my plan, Mr. Abernathy's tired eyes lit up with excitement. "You're the man with the golden retriever, right? Henderson made me take down a birdhouse my granddaughter helped me build," he said, his voice full of anger. "You've got our vote. What can we do to help?" As I talked to more and more of my neighbors, I listened to their stories. They were frustrated. They felt ignored and bullied. My resolve grew stronger and stronger with every conversation. I was not just fighting for my dog anymore. I was fighting for the Miller's kids so they could play freely. I was fighting for Mrs. Gable so she could plant her beloved sunflowers without getting a violation notice. I was fighting for a better community for everyone. We planned a small gathering in my backyard. It was a casual barbecue. Anyone who wanted a change was invited. I grilled burgers and hot dogs. Mrs. Gable served her famous iced tea. Buddy, of course, was the guest of honor. He greeted everyone with a happy wagging tail. He gave happy, wet licks. He charmed every single person there, resting his head on knees and asking for belly rubs, the perfect ambassador for our cause. The party was a big success. People who used to just wave to each other were now sharing stories, laughing, and connecting over their shared frustration. We set up a big whiteboard and wrote down all of our ideas. People talked about their hopes for our community. They wanted more openness, more friendliness, more common sense. We created a platform. It was a list of real changes we wanted to make. We wanted fairer, clearer rules for pets. We wanted to create a community garden in a neglected common area. We wanted more fun events for everyone. And most importantly, we wanted board meetings where people's voices would be heard and respected, not ignored. Carol, of course, was very, very angry about my campaign. When she saw my flyers, she started her own vicious counter-campaign against me. She spread mean rumors. She told people I was a dangerous troublemaker who wanted to turn Pleasant Meadows into a lawless place where dogs would run wild and destroy everything. She tried to find bad information about me. She even called my old boss at my old job and my old landlord, looking for any little bit of dirt she could use against me. She even filed a complaint with the current board, demanding they stop me from running in the election. She said I was breaking some old forgotten rule about campaigning. But Mrs. Gable was ready for this. A retired librarian, she loved to read rules and documents. She had already found the rule and happily pointed out to a flustered Mr. Henderson that the rule only applied to commercial selling. Carol's angry plans failed badly. People saw her for who she really was, a bitter, hateful woman driven by a personal grudge. Her constant complaining and negativity only made our positive message of hope and change seem even more appealing. Her husband, Robert, seemed to be getting smaller every day. Sometimes I would see him sadly pulling weeds in his perfect flower beds. He would give me a small, sad, almost unseen wave when Carol wasn't looking. I felt sorry for him. He was like a prisoner in his own beautiful house, trapped by Carol's strong anger. The day of the election finally came. It was a bright, clear day, the sky a hopeful blue. The community clubhouse was full of people. It was the largest number of people for an HOA election in the history of Pleasant Meadows. There was a clear excitement in the air, a mix of tension and excitement. Mr. Henderson sat at the main table, looking very nervous. He kept wiping his sweaty hands on his pants. Carol was sitting in her usual seat in the front row, her arms crossed tightly, a very angry frown on her face. Before the voting started, each candidate for president was given 5 minutes to speak. Mr. Henderson went first. He gave a long, boring speech about the importance of rules and order. He talked about how he had kept the community safe and clean for 10 years. He sounded tired and completely out of touch. He did not understand the mood of the people in the room. Then, it was my turn. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. My heart was beating very fast. I looked out at all the faces. They were the faces of my neighbors. I saw the young Miller couple with their baby. I saw Mr. Abernathy, who gave me a thumbs up. I saw the old man who loved to garden. I saw the kids who had played with Buddy in my yard peeking through the door. I took a deep breath, and I spoke from the heart. I talked about how much I loved our community. I talked about my belief that it could be an even better, more welcoming place for everyone. I talked about fairness. I talked about listening to each other. I talked about building a community based on respect and kindness, not on fear and small rules. This place is named Pleasant Meadows, I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. It's time we lived up to that name. It's time our HOA worked for us, not against us. I never said Carol's name, but everyone in that room knew exactly who I was talking about when I said that no single person's personal anger should have the power to make their neighbors feel unwelcome and unhappy in their own homes. When I finished, the room, which had been very quiet and attentive, burst into applause. It was a sudden, loud wave of clapping. I even saw Mrs. Davis, the shy secretary, clapping with a big, hopeful smile on her face. The paper ballots were passed out. People marked their choice. Then the votes were collected and counted. The feeling in the room was very tense. You could feel the shared hope and worry in the air. Finally, Mrs. Gable stood up. She had agreed to be a neutral vote counter, with a person from Henderson's side watching to ensure fairness. Mrs. Gable was smiling a huge, bright smile. Her face was full of joy. The new president of the Pleasant Meadows Homeowners Association, she announced, her voice full of victory, is Mr. Mark Johnson. The room exploded with cheers and applause. I was filled with so many feelings all at once. Relief, gratitude, disbelief. I had done it. I had actually truly done it. I looked over at Carol. Her face was a mask of pure shock, her mouth open. She could not believe it. Her perfect, controlled world had just been shattered. Her shock quickly turned into bright anger. She jumped up from her chair. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. This is a disaster. You cheated. This election is a fraud. I'll be suing every single one of you. And with that, she rushed out of the clubhouse. Her husband, Robert, who had suffered for so long in silence, followed behind her like a lost, confused puppy. I didn't care about her. I was surrounded by my friends. I was surrounded by my neighbors. I was surrounded by the people who had trusted me. I was the new president. And things in Pleasant Meadows were about to change for the better. The very first thing I did as president was to call for a complete review of the entire HOA rulebook. We formed a committee of diverse residents, gardeners, parents, pet owners, retirees. Together, we would go through all the rules, one by one, and suggest changes based on common sense and community well-being. Our first meeting was amazing. It was held in the clubhouse, but this time, we had coffee and donuts, and people were actually talking to each other, laughing. Mr. Abernathy presented his proposal for new, more flexible birdhouse guidelines, which was met with enthusiastic approval. We started to take apart all the old, unfair rules, the ones that had been used to bother people for years. We rewrote the pet regulations. We made them clear and fair, focusing on responsible ownership leash laws, waste cleanup not on banning pets, or punishing their owners for a single bark. We even added a new good neighbor clause, a simple rule that urged residents to try and solve issues with a friendly conversation before filing a formal complaint. We started planning fun community events, a monthly potluck dinner, a summer festival in the park, a huge community-wide garage sale. The clubhouse, which used to be a place of judgment and fear, was now a happy place, filled with laughter and friendship. It became the true heart of the community. The community garden, which had been just a patch of weeds, was brought back to life by a team of happy volunteers. Mrs. Gable's sunflowers finally had a special place to grow, right in the center, tall and proud. Slowly but surely, Pleasant Meadows started to feel like the place it was always meant to be. And what about Carol? Well, she did sue us. She filed a pointless lawsuit against the HOA saying election fraud and a conspiracy against her. But her case was built on nothing but her own bitter feelings. The court quickly dismissed it. Now that the HOA board was no longer her personal weapon, her complaints had no power. She became an outsider, isolated in her big, perfect house. Her own bitterness built a wall around her, separating her from the happy, wonderful community just outside her door. A few months later, a for sale sign appeared on her perfectly neat lawn. I never saw her again. The day before they moved out, Robert came over to my house. He looked like a different man. The tired, haunted look in his eyes was gone. In its place was a quiet, hopeful light. He shook my hand, and his handshake was firm. He thanked me. "You saved me," he said, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the HOA. I never knew how bad it was until I saw a way out. She needs to control things. When she lost control here, she lost interest. The fight was the only thing she cared about. He told me he was moving to the countryside, to a small farm. There, he could have a big garden and finally get the dog he had always wanted. A big, silly mixed breed from a shelter, he said, a real true smile spreading across his face. One that barks. He reached down and gave Buddy a long, loving scratch behind the ears. Life in Pleasant Meadows is different now. It's better. It's warmer. The kids still come over to play with Buddy in my yard, and their laughter fills the air. The neighbors still greet each other with real smiles and friendly chats. But now, there is a new feeling, a sense of shared ownership and pride. We all feel like this is our community because we built it together. That feeling was not there before. I never planned to be a leader. I never wanted to be a president. I was just a regular guy who loved his dog more than anything in the world. But sometimes, life pushes you into a hard place. It doesn't ask if you are ready. Sometimes, you have to stand up and fight for what you believe in. You have to fight not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And sometimes, the best way to change the world is to start in your own little corner of it, your own Pleasant Meadows. As I walk Buddy through the peaceful, happy streets of our community, I know that we are finally, truly home. And every single wag of his tail, every friendly bark that echoes through the neighborhood is a sweet, joyful reminder. It reminds me of the battle we won. It reminds me of the community we built together. And it reminds me of the simple, powerful love that triumphed over all the bitterness in the world.